name is Christy Alvord. I work for the Parks and Recreation Department for Allentown, and I've been working on this Valania Park process, the public input process. We have Chris Hendricks and Ryan Griffiths from our office here tonight as well. We've all been working on this to make sure that we're reaching out to the Valania Park community, finding out what the community wants for this, and we're really excited that we are able to do this master planning process. I'm going to explain a little bit more about the other folks who are up here in a few minutes, but we have Greg and Nate from Langen Engineering who are on board to kind of help with the design process and talk about a little bit more of what we've put together for this park. So what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of background as to what we've done so far in getting public input from people and where we're at in the process and what the next steps are, just so you have a background. I'm not going to do a presentation for that part, so I'm just going to talk, and it won't be that long for this part. So back in March, we kind of got the go-ahead to say we're going to reach out to the Valania Park community, the neighborhood, the organizations in this area, and find out what people want to see, what they like and don't like at the park. So we did letters and flyers to a 2-block radius around the park, a whole bunch of organizations that are in that area, the churches, the neighborhood groups that are in that area. From that, we had some people who reached back out to us and said they wanted to come and talk with us about it, so we did some kind of key people interviews with people who were interested, got some feedback from them as to what they wanted to see. And then we have a survey that we did that we had as our website in case people didn't want to come and talk with us or didn't want to have a conversation. They could do it electronically, or we had hard copies of the survey at each of our public meetings. So in April, we had our first public meeting at the Arts Academy Charter School. We had about 15 people there. And it was kind of a really nice jumping off point because everybody then found out that we were doing this and more people jumped on board and we got more organizations who were interested. Some of the things that we heard from feedback from that first meeting were about safety of the park, both in the park but also being fixed up so that it was safe to walk around. That the play equipment should be updated. There was an interest in having an open green space for the kids to play and be able to play games. A nicer pavilion, and a spray park. Those were all ideas that came from that first meeting. Then in May, we went to the NAACP meeting because they came forward and said they were really interested in being a part of this process. So we talked with them a little bit about where we were at and invited them to come to this meeting as well. There were about 20 people in attendance. We talked again about kind of safety of the park and fixing things up in the park. That there were some things that were broken and had been neglected for a number of years that needed to be fixed. So that's a lot of what that conversation was about. In June, we had another public meeting at Valania Park. We kind of had like an open house meeting, and I recognize some of you from that meeting, where people could kind of drop in, look at the pictures of the park, talk about what they liked and didn't like, and we were right there so we could really look at different parts of the park and talk about them. We had a lot of great feedback from that one. There were about 30 people that came throughout the whole time that we were there. A lot of that focused on fixing the things that were broken in the park. The heaving concrete, the cracks in the pavement, the falling down wall, some of those types of things. There were concerns about trees, whether to keep them, which trees are good to keep. We want shade, but we want the trees to be healthy, so there was a lot of conversation about that. The pavilion and the building came up as a big conversation point. Do we keep the building? We want a pavilion space. How do we best use that building? Should it come out? Should we relocate it? Lots of questions about that. And then a lot of people really said, we don't want the playground to be any smaller. You know, it's a big playground. It's actually the second largest playground in the city. We don't want that to change as part of this process. And the kids deserve this really big place to play, and we want to make sure that it gets upgraded, but we don't lose the space. July, we went to the kids. So we have, the city runs a summer playground program in many of our parks, but Valania is one of them. And we have about 35 kids that attend every day in the summer. And some of you actually, I know, help out with that and kind of support the kids being there, which is great. So we talked with the kids directly. We wanted to get their feedback of what they like and don't like in the park. They obviously focused a lot on the playground and what they want to play on. So they told us they really like things that they can climb on, and they really wanted swings. Those were the two huge things that they told us about. They love the idea of like a spider web or monkey bars or something like that type of equipment, and swings. So we looked at that, and that's the few. some of the feedback we got from them. Also, they said they really want something that includes education or history in the park, which I thought was really cool. I was surprised by that. That was kind of a cool piece of information they gave us. They liked the idea of a spray park, kind of like Bucky Boyle or the PPL Plaza. They'd heard of those places, and they said that would be cool to have here. And they love the basketball court. They said, don't do anything with the basketball court. Don't move it. Don't get rid of it. None of that. They said the one thing that a lot of the kids said is that they want a space for the younger kids to be able to learn a little bit about basketball without being with all the older kids playing basketball. So we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. They're going to talk a little bit more about that and how we can work with that. But that was something that they said. We love basketball. Everyone here loves basketball, and we want the little kids to be able to learn as well. So that's some of the feedback we got from the kids. So then between August and October, we worked with Langen Engineering, and as the city, we gave them all this feedback. We gave them write-ups about it, the surveys, all the information we had so far, so that they could take that, look at the park, look at what makes the most sense for that space, and some options. There's a steering committee that has some of you, actually, can you raise your hand if you're on the steering committee, just so everyone can see? Do you mind just saying your name or introducing yourself for a moment, just so people know what you've been doing?
Mike Comic, prison chaplain.
Okay.
Tony Flowers.
Okay.
Dave Snyder.
Daniel Blunt.
Okay.
Oh, he's the teacher.
Good.
Yep.
Okay, Ham. Okay. Did I miss anyone? And there's a few other city staff members, someone from our streets department, our parks department, our planning department, so that we can look at like stormwater management and some of those other things that come into play when we're looking at the park overall. So we met with the steering committee, we've looked at this. They've seen a little bit of this, not the final plan, and we're now moving into a draft plan here. So what this is a draft. This is not final. This is to give you guys an idea of what could happen in the park. You can say what you like and what you don't like, what you think is missing, or what you think there's too much of, and we'll go through some of that as we go through. So the next steps after this meeting, just so you're aware for timeline-wise, we're going to not just talk with this group of people. There are some other groups of people who've expressed interest as we've been going through this whole process that we'd like to take a couple weeks and go back to them, show them this draft now that we have it in case they weren't able to come to the meeting, get more feedback and more ideas from people, and those will all be shared with Langen Engineering. And then from there, we will come up with a final draft plan, which should be presented to City Council sometime in either December or January. And that will also have with it a cost estimate of what this park will cost. From there, what we want to do is apply for grants. So this is kind of grant season. Now that we have a master plan, you can spend time in the winter and the early spring to apply for federal funding, state funding, some stormwater management money sometimes is out there to go towards building the project. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to hear back from the grants. So I'm not sure exactly when the construction timeline would be, and I don't want to make any promises on that. I do know that the city really wants to move quickly on this project, as soon as we can get the funding to be able to do that. And I believe that there is access to some federal funds that could be allocated as soon as next year to at least start the process, maybe in the fall of next year. But again, we have to kind of see how it goes with getting the grants and getting the cities hopefully some matching money for that too. So that's kind of our plan for where we're at in the planning process. And I'm going to turn it over to Greg Woodruff and Nate first. Yes.
You asked a couple questions. You mentioned a portion there, you said you're going to take this plan back to some other stakeholders.
Yes.
And are those some of the stakeholders you have listed on the list, or additional people?
Some of those people are Building 21 expressed interest, the Arts Academy, the NAACP. I want to make sure we talk with them. There's the Bradbury Sullivan Center that we talked to early on in the process. So there's a couple people like that we want to talk to. I'm going to get water. Oh, sorry. I'm fighting a cold. In case you can't tell, so just bear with me. So yes, we will go back to those people. And if there's other groups that would express interest that want to weigh in, you know, we're not too late in the process for people who maybe haven't heard about what's going on and want to chime in, no problem. To kind of get their feedback on this draft.
I'm not too familiar with the Arts Academy, but I'm the finance administrator for the Baum School of Art.
Okay, great.
So I know that there might be some grants out for there, and maybe we can include a little bit of arts in there for the children.
Cool.
I think that would be great. I'd like to be involved with that.
Okay, great. Sure, go ahead.
Since it's gonna redo the park, is it gonna be water sufficient and sufficient that it makes its own beneficial things? Like the water that's gonna be there, can that water be regenerated, that we can give it back the energy, be an energy park with the energy from the light, get charged, and we get that, and it can sell it back to the city?
Okay.
Because we can make a smart park.
Okay.
Okay, it is time for a smart park. It is time for sufficient park where kids can play, and the surface is not gravel or soot. It's rubber. When they fall, they don't break. You understand?
Yes, absolutely. And I would love if we're going to go through Langen Engineering. Our
No, that's why I
gentleman
spoke
here.
on that fast.
They're gonna go through piece by piece every part of the park. So that will some of those will be answered, and some of those questions will be answered as they go through this plan. Yes.
Hi, you had mentioned the children would like to know more about the history of Valania Park. Will that include the forced removal of a black community through threats of eminent domain to clear that area for urban renewal?
So if that is, I understand that there is some histories that's
It's
very
in the
sad
book.
about the park, and there's some things that are an issue that came up from the beginning of when this park was first made. And I know that's something that has come up through this process. And if that's something that the community says, we want some sort of, you know, monument or some sort of kiosk that explains some of the history of Valania Park, that's certainly something we can talk about.
Didn't you say that earlier, that you put some history, because the kids want history?
I said the kids would like to. So what I said,
What reflects the child?
Mhm.
Would it be the child's history or some history that they don't know of? Like, there's people in here who took state championship. And kids, our fathers and grandchildren, their mothers played basketball in school. They need to see those achievements.
Mm-hmm.
I played with Andre Reed. Other people have achieved things. Just because they sit in that park and they're elderly, their children need to reap the benefits of what they put in already.
Mhm.
White or black and indifferent.
yeah, and that's definitely a piece that I think, I don't think we would decide at this meeting exactly what that piece of history would be, but if we all decide, or if the community all decides that history is something that they really want integrated into the park, there's definitely an opportunity for us to have a conversation down the road about what that's gonna look like in the park.
I think that if that's something that they want, maybe we can include the museum. I mean, we have the museum that's right up the street on Fifth. They could help with history, that's what they're there for. And then again, the art school, we're also on Fifth, you know, we could actually use that area a little bit more as well.
We got a historian up there. Hey, Shirley.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm from Building 21. I'm the partnership coordinator.
Great,
Nice
glad you're
to meet
here.
you. Our students have been working in this park since last year with Lehigh University. They have done studies of pollution. They've looked at the type of trees that are in the park. They are working with the city on revamping that intersection and talking with the Trade Commission about trees. So we can talk at another time, but our students are invested in this park. This is where they have gym class. So I know that they have a ton of input and would be happy to look into the history of the park and get some student developed ownership.
Cool.
Just to expound on that, there is history down at the Heritage Museum. So it's readily available. We just had it at the convention. So all you gotta do is just walk in, ask them,
Okay.
and they could provide you with just about everything, every family that lived there and whatnot.
So it sounds like that's something that the kids want and the community really wants, and that we could really, you know, make sure that we build something in that we built a space in for it in the design, and then when we're going to build it, sounds like we need to do some work in the next few months to get an idea of what exactly that's gonna look like, and make sure that that's kind of almost like a sidebar to this whole thing.
I would love to see our kids work hand in hand with you on, because we're project-based learning. So we can get the engineers, the environmental kids all involved.
Cool. Okay, great. That's awesome.
What about adequate parking? Because every park I go to, I jog every day, in Georgia, Cedar, all of them, and they have adequate parking. This park has never had adequate parking.
That's very true. My house is.
Never.
Yeah. That's my house right
I
there.
park
They
at
always
Cedar,
park
I
in
can
my
jog
parking
20 miles to a next park, there's adequate parking there. I'll jog another 15 miles and nonstop just to see. I jog from Bucky Boyle to Irving Park, there's adequate parking all over both of those
Very
parks.
true.
But if they take the parking away, if they add parking, you're gonna lose that footprint for the park, and it's already a small park.
But
So-
what about the adjacent parking lot that's already
That's what I'm saying.
established?
Yeah, they could,
Well, so that's not owned by the
That's
city,
owned
but
by
that's
the lawyer.
definitely something
That's
to
private.
have a discussion about programming as to whether that business would allow, you know, that would be an open lot to be used for that.
I think talking to the guy who owns the lot,
He does that all the time, he allows us to use it.
it's just a matter of taking care of it.
Mhm.
You know, and it's understandable, you know, seeing
And he has a
how,
right to say it.
seeing how we've lost it. I think all we have to do is talk to the gentleman. He's been fairly fair. We just haven't owned up to our end completely.
Okay.
So that's why he's a little, you know,
Cause they don't want to
upset.
come behind and
But
say,
nevertheless, I think in the future, I think we can get some guys or a group of people who can actually maintain that part of it.
And that's kind of a programming thing we can talk about,
Right.
you know, as we've gotten the design finalized, we can talk about the programming and what we want to see happening in the park. That could be a totally separate conversation. So if it's okay, I'd like to turn it over to Greg and Nate for them to just
One
go
more question.
through. Sure.
We'll have to take questions too.
Yeah.
Well, this is about money, so
Oh, yeah,
I'm sure
no,
you don't got it.
ask her about money.
I
I can only count.
Are you gonna in our last meeting, there was a conversation about talking to Uptown, Allentown.
Upside down.
Upside Allentown, because they're supposed to take care of the ancillary areas, have funding for the ancillary areas around. So this would be a good opportunity for them to also join this partnership, because if we're still gonna wait on grants and wait on the city to do this, this may be another 5 years, maybe another 3 to 5 years this project's completed. So, I mean, and they've got a lot of money to tear down raise buildings and put them back up.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to figure out how we can partner them into this plan to be able to do some of the things that we need to do, even as seed money, you know, to get it started. Councilman Guridy said that he's gonna do what he can to find seed to start from the city's end. So if we can get someone, the city to match, or them to match the city, or the city to match them, I mean, that would be a good start. We're talking about $500,000 to $750,000 if you got a partnership.
Absolutely. I mean, Upside Allentown's definitely one of the places we would look. One of them is Community Development Block Grant. That's a federal program, and this is in one of the geographical areas that qualifies for it. That's what we ended up using if anyone's familiar with Stevens Park, and I don't want to talk too much about Stevens Park because this is Valania Park and we're not doing the same thing. But Stevens Park had a complete renovation and it just reopened this year, and that was a combination of some state money from DCNR, it's the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, some city money, and it was this Community Development Block Grant money. And that project was close to $800,000, and that was that combination, and the city doing some in-kind work. So we're hoping to kind of do something similar to that for this park.
I'm hoping that you're looking at private money, because all the money you're talking about is funding, it's federal, it's public money.
Yes.
I'm looking for private money, I'm hoping that that's where you're gonna be searching.
Okay, well, Upside Downtown has access to some of that, correct?
One question is,
What they got on that?
We will make the ask, but really the best funding sources for us, especially for a project like this, would be the grants.
excuse me,
Yes,
has there been any talk about the lighting in the park?
that will come up as we go through the plan. So is it okay if I turn it over for them to go through the plan, so hopefully they answer some of the questions? Okay,
Sure.
great, thank you.
So, Christy said our names before, but just by way of introduction, my name is Greg Woodruff. This is Nate Burns. We both work for Langen Engineering. We are Langen is a land development engineering firm. We have an office right here in Bethlehem in the Valley. We do a bunch of projects throughout the Lehigh Valley. We also do a bunch of park projects in other cities, including a lot of park projects throughout Philly. Nate specifically has a lot of experience with park design projects throughout Philadelphia. So just a little bit about what our role is here, how we got here, and what we think we can help with. We totally see ourselves as part of this process, not the process, not driving the process, not the people with all the answers. We're just here to hopefully provide a little bit of information about things that you guys may have questions on and not know how to answer those questions and how they feed into what you want to get done, and that's what we hope to do. We're not here to tell you what you need or what you want. We're here to try and hopefully provide a little bit of guidance. When you say what you need or what you want, we can help figure out those engineering logistics or those site logistics that are really more in our wheelhouse. So what we're going to go through is what has resulted from the feedback that you guys gave, that the city collected and sort of percolated to us. Nate's you'll see just a little bit of logistics. What's on the hard copy boards in the back and on the TV screens that are at the perimeter of the room is the overall site sketch plan or master plan as it exists today. As Christy said, that's not a hard and fast document. That's just something for you all to look at and react to tonight. What's going to be on the main screen here, which Nate's going to go through in somewhat pretty thorough detail here, is a description of what exists, sort of the process we went through. What exists? What did we hear relative to components that you guys would like to see in the park? The plan that resulted that's going to stay static on all those screens, and then importantly, some reference images for what those components might look like in the park. Because it's sometimes hard to really interpret what the intent of that plan is in sort of 3 dimensions without those photo images, and Nate will walk through what these components could look like and how they could function for you guys in the community one by one. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Nate, and he's going to go through things. And I would say, if you guys have questions or thoughts as we go, not that you're not welcome to bring them up, but we are going to have plenty of discussion afterwards. So if you can let us get through as much of it as possible, and then if you have a glaring comment to make, try to let us get through, and then we can go back. We'll happily pull back up any images you guys want to look at throughout the presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. Like Greg said, we actually have done this same process with communities similar to yourself in the city of Philadelphia for about 10 years now. And it's a very, very similar process where the Parks Department gives us a lot of information from all the public outreach and everything that everyone here has said. And then we look at the park and kind of make our professional judgment on how we fit all the public outreach and all the input from everyone like yourselves into that park and get, start to get to where you want to get. And then we just kind of take all of that and throw it against the wall and come up with a concept plan that we think fits everything that you want. And then you're going to sit here and tell us that all the reasons that it won't work for you as a community. And that's what's important, because we're looking at it as outsiders and we're not going to end up living with it every day. So we need to sit down and talk to everyone here so that we can understand how we fit everything that we want that you want in this park and how we make it work for you. And there's probably pieces of this that you're going to say, no, that's not at all what we want, or yes, that's absolutely what we want, or you should move that over here because we walk in. And that's what we're here for. So, we're putting this up so we have something to talk about and a point of reference, and then we'll move forward from there. So obviously, this is an aerial of the park. I find it's usually good just to start with, some images. One of the interesting things about looking at images of something like this, if you're in the park every day, or you're in the park once a week, or you drive by it a lot or walk by it, you don't always see it the same way or pick up the same things that a new person or a visitor picks up. So I usually think throwing some images out are interesting. We notice walking up, we notice the big green wall and things like that. Maybe it's the green monster. The entry to the park, love it or hate it. I think there's some nice parts that I like about that entry. There's some other parts that I know people don't necessarily like. The volleyball courts. Do people use them? Don't they? Does it really serve a benefit? The existing restroom facilities, I think everyone would admit they leave a lot to be desired. Is there a way that we can accommodate that and make everyone happy? I know that's a big issue. And obviously the basketball court, And, you know, anyone visiting there can tell that the basketball court is very heavily used and loved by everyone.
National tournaments,
Really?
yes.
See that, and those are the kind of things that we,
No, that's why I spoke when, and I
Right.
apologize. for-
and that's all important stuff that we need to be able to integrate to link it back to the community. You know, the existing play equipment, you know, a lot of times play equipment is put in, and it's put in with good intent, and then it gets old, and it gets used, and it gets a little worn down. And actually, this is a pretty common practice, and like I said, we do this a lot with the city of Philadelphia, where we come in and we work with the manufacturers to come in and give a facelift to that equipment. You can add some pieces on to bring some interest back. There are code issues that we have to deal with for handicapped and differently abled people to bring that up to code to some extent. So, you know, this is actually, you know, the fact that there is a good bit of play equipment there already is actually a good thing. We can go in without a tremendous amount of expense and kind of pull some pieces off and add some other pieces in and kind of get to a better place with that. But, you know, and I think somebody already said it, the surface under the play equipment leaves a lot to be desired. There's no doubt about that.
And drainage.
And drainage,
The
yeah.
water runs right down around that.
And it's difficult to drain through wood chips. it's very
It's
difficult to drain.
runoff from the other building, the housing unit.
It's a difficult situation. So what we did is we took kind of the highlights of what we read from all the public feedback, and we kind of, you know, sat down with an aerial and looked at what was there and evaluated the benefits of where you would put things and where you would move things and how you would do it. And you know, this is like I said, this is our thought, and we're here to talk about this then. But I'm going to run through this really quickly. You know, first, you know, the basketball court where it is. You know, maybe there's a better location for the basketball court, but to move the basketball court all of a sudden uses a lot of money. To rehab the basketball court in place is not such a big effort. So we felt, keep the basketball court where it is. Now that doesn't mean if everybody here says, no, the basketball court needs to be in the lower left corner, and that's absolutely where, we can talk about that. Same with the tot lot. We're going to try to save that equipment and really, you know, get some money back for the city to put other things here. So we're going to rehabilitate that tot lot. We're going to renovate it, new paint, add on some cool pieces, you know, that everyone here can, and the kids can help us to figure out. You know, we heard that people were interested in having a spray ground and an amphitheater. You know, the problem with an amphitheater is when there's nothing going on there, it's an empty space that nobody wants to use. So, you know, one of the neat things, and we have some images that you can do with that, is you can put a spray ground in there. So in the middle of the day, it's a spray ground. You have a spot to sit to watch the kids play. You can hang out. And then in the evening, if you want to do something there and have a concert, have a show, you turn off the spray ground and you're there. You know, centrally in the park, we're looking at having a pavilion. You know, really kind of, we looked at the benefits to reuse the existing pavilion or not, and what it was really worth, and if it would do, you know, what we needed to do to support the youth programs, to support potential restrooms, to support potential storage, and you know, the existing building maybe doesn't do that so well. So we're looking at, you know, kind of a new pavilion and you know, gateway entry into the park. Behind that, kind of centrally in the park, you know, we also heard that people wanted this like central green area where people could play. Kids could play. You could throw a football. You know, maybe there's a community event. Maybe there's a picnic that takes place on the green. Just a big open multi-use area, but it really allows you to get to any other piece of the park from the center. Obviously, we talked about the tot lot, and then down in this corner, you know, the chess grove. We heard that there's a real need and a real interest to have a spot for people to come and play chess, to have adult games, to sit on a park bench with friends or things like that. So we really want to provide a different area and a different space for all the users of the park, so we can really make everyone happy. Because as much as this park is about kids, it's about the community, and we need to be able to have everybody in the community have a space in the park. So what that essentially becomes when we start to fit the pieces together and see how it goes and see how it works is really kind of this sketch. And we're going to go through this kind of area by area, but this is the sketch that everybody looked at when they came in, and you can feel free when we get to the question part to tell us everything that's wrong with it. And, you know, I have a thick skin, you won't hurt my feelings, and, you know, it's more important that you tell us what you like and what you don't like, and, you know, that's really why we're here. So we'll go through it piece by piece with a couple of images that'll help you to kind of understand what we're thinking as we look at this. So the first area is the pavilion, and really what does that mean? Now this is, in the bottom, this is kind of what our vision is for the pavilion, but there's way too much storage in that, and the bathrooms are far too large. So, but really the idea there is that it's a pavilion that passes through in the center, and then has some sort of smaller on the sides. And if you look at it here, on the sides there's some sort of smaller area. It could even be built in stages, where when the pavilion is built initially, we could come back and retrofit it as funding allows to build in a storage area for the summer camps, to build in a restroom, 1 or 2 facilities. Maybe in the short term, we can make the restroom just an alcove, so you can slip in portable toilet in the short term, so you're not looking at the big yellow toilet that nobody wants to look at. But it'll allow us to kind of stretch the funding in the short term. But really, I wanted to put that image in because I feel that's kind of the big thought for the pavilion if you were to cut it like that. But it would allow a pass through. You'd be able to see all the way through the park. And as you pass through the pavilion, this is kind of the concept with the central green, that it would be not necessarily trees that close, but it would be kind of just a central linear space with some sidewalks that you could really do what you want with. You could use it how you wanted to use it. It will be a flexible space. And that's this area here. And this is kind of onto the central green. And as we get into a little bit more discussion at the end, I'm definitely interested to hear what people want from that space and what you want in that space. Is it just totally a green space like this? Is there a feature at the end? And I think I have some slides. We heard at one point that people were looking for some sort of feature in the park. Whether it's a fountain, that kind of, harkens back to the historic fountain that was there at one point, or whether it's something else, that's certainly open for discussion. But we're starting to think about, up here, how does something like that work? And can we, make it work and flow through the park from the pavilion? And this is where we're talking about that. What is it? Is it something that's a little more traditional? Is it something that's a little more sculptural or architectural? Or is it something that's just kind of weird? I don't know what you want. I heard a lot of people talking about, the importance of the history of the park. Maybe this is a great spot for it. I actually have some really great thoughts on as we move on about where else we could start to tell the story of the history of the park.
Or the arts. We heard comments before
Right.
about incorporating the arts. Maybe that feature becomes something that's sculpture-based or something along those lines. There's lots of different ways to go, and so that's what we're here to sort of investigate.
Could they have spots, since you're working with the art school and stuff like that, and the other people are people, because I'm an artist, that like in Philly, they have murals, and every so many years they change the mural. Plus, for the kids, okay, we invite the kids of all races of it, and they have little places like little slots where we put their artwork there, and there's like 12 of them. Now, and you probably did the parks down there.